What's the one skill that every business owner, every entrepreneur, even every creator needs, but they never practice? They're not aware of it. And a lot of times they're really bad. It's pitching. So, in this short episode, I want to walk you through how pitching is an art and how you can get a lot better at it. So, you can get those sales, those partnerships, that visibility that you really crave and want. Because the reality is, there's so much information out there when it comes to sales, when it comes to marketing, but when it specifically comes to pitching, it seems to be a little bit left under the table. It's as if we're all at this club dancing, and it's just assumed that you know how to do it. And you can technically, right? As you know, when you go into a club, there's all different levels of dancing. So, what I want to teach you is how can you get in the better level of this? How can you really get to the point where you're able to create what you want from someone, some group, some business, and sell it to them. And really have them feel not only that, wow, I want this, or yes, I want to work with you, but also how did they know exactly what I needed? And to feel good about it afterwards. So, no sleaze in this pitching episode. Now, some of you might have already seen before we jump into this episode that I am launching on October 14th a program called Podcast Alchemy. So, I'm going to be taking a small group of people who want to launch their very own podcast, and I'm going to help you do it. We will be going over the course of 12 weeks, developing your podcast, getting those episodes, teaching you everything you need to know for it, even doing your tech setup for you so that you can have a podcast which is ready to go. We'll also be going over the marketing, etc., so that you can help it be successful. And we'll be going over how you can monetize it. It's going to be doors opening October 14th to waitlist members only. And in order to get on the waitlist, you can just go to that link. You can also go to Her First 3 Years website and you will see Start a Podcast. That's where you can sign up for the waitlist. Now let's get into pitching, the magic art here. Now, I was having a conversation. This is how it came up. I was having a conversation with another entrepreneur friend, and we were just talking about the different things that we wish we would have learned sooner about business. But one of the things that I brought up that she hadn't really thought about is pitching. And the reason why pitching has always been something for most of my adult life that I feel really good at is because I had an amazing trainer. And I will talk about that in a second. But this is not a skill that I was born to do. This is not something that was super easy for me. It is definitely something that I had to learn later. And I kept being put in these situations. It was all on me to pitch to someone who often was at a way higher level than I was in order to get them to buy, collaborate, or do an event together. So I want to show you how to do that. And I want you to ask yourself first, on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong do you feel, or how talented, let's say, do you feel when it comes to pitching? You have someone that you want to work with. Let's start with that. There's someone you really want to work with. They've got a great audience. You know, if you could get in front of that audience, you would do incredible. Picture that person in your mind. Doesn't matter how far ahead of you they are. Don't think about it. Just picture them in your mind and tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, yeah, no way, to 10 being like, I could do it, and they would say yes. Where do you fall in your pitching ability? Would you be able to go to that person, let's say you have their contact info, and would you get them to say yes to that collaboration? Would you be able to do it without offering them any money or anything else? Would you be able to do it? If you're like most people, you probably fall below a 5 on this. Some of you are a bit higher, but if you are a bit higher, I want to challenge you for a follow-up question, which is, if you feel so confident, do you feel that your business growth right now matches up with that? Because if your business growth is really slow, or you're not getting the sales, you're not getting the partnerships, you're not getting the PR, the visibility you want, but you think your pitching ability is really high, there's a disconnect here. And that's what we also want to solve for you. So when you think about pitching, it's basically the art of seeing someone or a company or a group of people and knowing exactly what they want so that they feel like you've read their minds. They understand exactly what your pain points are. If you are a fitness coach and you're working with women, you want to be able to have them say, wow, how did you know that was my strength issue? How did you know that was my motivation problem? And if you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, or really if you followed any business podcast, you know that the way we grow is in collaboration and partnerships. So you getting those is essential to your growth, however you do it. For me personally, I've done a lot of it through company partnerships and then also through podcast partnerships. That is how I found growth. And if I didn't have the pitching skills, there is zero chance I would have been able to do it. When we think about pitching, it has 3 ingredients for you to really stand out, to get those partnerships, for you to get those sales, for you to stand out. There are 3 ingredients to a pitch. It's the psychology, it is the positioning, yours, so how you stand out, and it's the language that you use. If you can master those 3 ingredients, people will say yes to you, and they will say yes to you when you never thought it was possible. I've had some people say yes to me. I must have dropped my jaw physically a few times just thinking, did they really just say yes? And that's what I want for you too, because the reality is this is a skill most of us don't use. We didn't even think about it. But let's back up and tell you about baby me. Baby pitching Sade, how bad she was. So when I first started out, I was 23, I believe, 22 or 23. And I was working with someone who was a master pitcher, just one of those really naturally born salespeople. And so when I was working with them, they were really, this is why I'm not saying gender or anything else. They were really on the border of, let's say, manipulative. Okay. So I don't want to go down that path. Okay. We've all had bad bosses. But one of the skills that I really did learn from this person was how to pitch well, and how to pitch when you are the underdog, when you are the smaller person, the smaller audience, the person with less experience, the person in a partnership with less to offer. And I'm doing, the quote fingers because sometimes what you offer is actually very high value. And that is one part of the pitching equation, right? Is recognizing not only what do people want to hear, but what do you genuinely have to offer? And I didn't understand any of that. So when I went in and I was working with this boss, I just was very naive. And my job was to pitch to people who were extremely well known and extremely public and probably got thousands of pitches every single day. I'm not exaggerating here. They would have got thousands. And I had to go to them and say, hey, I have this project for you from this person you've never heard of. Do you want to do it? Now, I wasn't the one sending it. My boss was, but I had to craft that pitch. So what I was instructed to do, what they trained me to do, which was so helpful, was to really look at someone's bio, to really look at the language they use, to really look at how are they presenting themselves, what kind of things have they been involved in recently. And this is pre-Instagram as well, so it wasn't as easy to know these things. I had to dig a little deeper. So going beneath the surface of what do they say they care about to what actually matters for them. And from there, crafting a pitch. And the first couple months I was doing this was my only job, okay? I was also transcribing some stuff, etc. and that, but basically this was my only job. It got from really bad, level -5, to really good. And I kept doing it to the point where even when I left this position, I went to go work for a tiny company. I think there were 4 or 5 of us, including the CEO. And I then had to pitch our products and services to these massive Fortune 500 companies who had already talked to or been working with our competitors who were making billions of dollars, had over 50 people on their team, trying to pitch to these really giant conglomerates and having so much competition. So I had to be good. I had to understand, how can I really make myself stick out? Because this is a little secret here you'll learn, is that most people think that pitching just involves sending an email. And so where we could compete was in understanding truly what the decision maker needed to hear and how we could position ourselves differently. So this is where the positioning comes in. So I'm going to give you a few examples of how pitching comes up because I know it's not the sexiest topic. It's not something that everybody wants to listen to or hear or do. But maybe when you hear these examples, you'll change your mind. So one example, very simple, is you're in a conversation with someone in real life talking about what you do. Now, that could be an informal conversation, you're at someone's wedding, or that could be you're at a networking event. Another case would be if you want to work with a specific company, whether you want to be paid for that collaboration or you just want access to their audience, you're pitching. When you want to be on a podcast, you're pitching. When you have a podcast and you want guests of a certain level, you're pitching. When you are even just selling, even a sales page, you are essentially pitching. Now, the difference there is that you're pitching to an avatar, to a group of people rather than an individual. But it's the same thing. It's psychology, it's positioning yours, and it's language theirs. So let's start with the psychology first here. If I take the example of when I first started this job, where I was pitching this project to these people who were super well-known leaders in the world, and they had no idea who my boss was, and I had to craft this email that would make them want to participate for free, by the way. I had to think about, okay, what do these people really value? This is where we get into the psychology, because if you can show someone that you see them, that you really understand them, it will make whatever you say stick a lot more than the person who hasn't done that work. If you have these really well-known people, they don't want you to target them based on what everyone else has written about them or what everyone else asks them about, because then you're just one of many, and the only way you distinguish then is, are you more famous? Do you have more money? We don't want that. Instead, we want to think about, okay, well, how can I really acknowledge something they care about, but maybe doesn't get as much exposure? And not using it in a sleazy way at all. You're not trying to be manipulative here. You are just trying to create a real connection with them. And that requires truly understanding who they are. Because if you think about the people, let's do this for a moment. Think about someone who you cannot stand being around. Someone that just feels annoying, you don't connect with. Think about that person now. Maybe they're not in your life anymore, but think about them. Do you feel that they've taken the time to understand you? Probably not, right? Probably a lot of that interaction is all about them. When we go to pitch, most people, we approach it that way. It is all about us, and that is why no one wants to stay in the room. Why people ghost, why people don't say yes. And I'm talking about ghosting in the business sense, not the personal, because that's a whole nother, that's my other podcast, Feel Good Naked. Listen to that one. You know, it can't just be about you. I get pitched so much every single day now. Every day. It's a lot more than it used to be. Every day from different agencies and individuals that want to be on one of my 2 shows. And 99% of those are really bad pitches, even from agencies. And I've said this before, please never pay an agency to pitch for you. Find someone else to do it. They will charge you hundreds to thousands and copy paste. But I will get these horrible pitches from these companies that I know are making millions from their poor clients. And it's all about them, or rather about their client. My client did XYZZZ this. They should come on your show because of it. That to me is kind of like if I'm going on a date and someone says, well, I'm good looking. I'm doing all this charity. I'm such a great person. I have blah, blah, blah. And the whole thing is about everything they have to offer. And they never once stop to think, what would I actually care to know about? They never ask a question. Think about how crap that date would be. And while all of that stuff could be true about that person, because they've presented it that way, you will never see them again. So when you next go to pitch, think about that. Think about instead, okay, I've got all of this expertise and I have all of this experience. Now I'm going to look at what do they value, their psychology, and package it for them. If I put it in the dating scenario, because I always know this helps you the most, if I put it in the dating scenario and I say, okay, I know that I am an adventurous person and I'm going on a date with someone who I know values that. I've taken the time to maybe ask them the questions, stalk their Instagram, whatever. I do all these things. I collect my data. I know. I've done some research. And I go in and I say something like, I really love to travel and to explore. I feel like it's so important for my personal growth. What have some of your experiences been? What do you think? That is a lot more attractive than me saying, oh, I'm just the most adventurous person. I'm so great and you should see me because of that. It's tone, it's presentation, it's positioning. So thinking about how can I take what I do and put it in a way that the other person values, bringing in that psychology. So if we jump now to the positioning aspect of it, the psychology is understanding the person. The positioning is understanding me, what I offer, and how I can make that attractive to them. So if we take it for business, for example, let's say that I am what do I want to use here as an example? Marketer of some sort. I do some sort of marketing in some way. It could be digital marketing, it could be writing, but I do something in marketing and I want to get a really high paid client in the door. I want to look at what does this company really value? What do they talk about a lot? And let's say that they talk a lot about boldness, being out of the box, doing something non-traditional. And I look at my own experience as a marketer and I say, hey, I've got this journey where I started working for myself at age 18. I'm making something up. That story is going to be valuable to them when I pitch. But so often we forget that a lot of our stories and the unique things about ourselves that are the most important thing that would really make someone stop and say yes, we ignore them and we just go for beige. We beige everything out. We just give the formal pitch. Hey, I'm a digital marketer. I've got this much in sales. I'd love to work with you. I can blah, blah, blah for your brand. It doesn't resonate. I will actually say that if you can nail your positioning, it doesn't matter how bad your pitch is otherwise. You can have a horrible pitch in terms of the language and still get the yes if you can position well. And I'm going to give you an example here that recently happened. It wasn't great. It was very basic language. Hey, I blah, blah, blah. I see what you're doing. This will help you. But the person's story was so good. It was so unique. And more than that, it aligns perfectly with the values of my show and also my personal values. I think this is really important to this day and age. If you can go beyond the company to the person, you have a much better chance of actually getting that yes. So really think about how can I position myself a little better? Now, something I'm going to give you an action step to take. And I've talked about this before. I have a training. It's completely free. It's how to get clients and grow your sales as a podcast guest. Now, whether or not you want to be a podcast guest is up to you from that training. But the first half of it is just about your positioning. How can you get good? Because when we talk about podcasts, whether you want to be a guest or you want a show, it is all pitching. So if you really want to understand how to get good, looking at that, watching that will be amazing help. You can see it in the comments or the show notes. Let's talk about the language now. So I mentioned that you could have really good positioning and then the language could be not there. But if you have the language, it just makes it a lot easier for people to say yes. So language is how you frame the offer. And the offer could be something you're selling directly to a group of people, for example, on your sales page, or it could be in a sales call, or it could be the DM to work with a company, whatever. The language you use is so important because if you can use their words, if you can use their tone, you're essentially mirroring back to them. You create this level of connection and trust. This is used all the time in personal relationships. Right? Easiest way to diffuse a conflict is to start acknowledging the words that someone else is saying. And language goes both ways. So it's not just the words you're using, but it's also the words you choose not to use. There have been many pitches I've received to be on my shows that are okay, I guess, but they're using words and language that I am against. okay, that my values are against. Specific example being on my Feel Good Naked podcast, it's a non-diet show. So the minute someone talks to me about shedding fat to be beautiful, that's not going to get a second look from me. And it would take 5 seconds for them to realize that's not the language to use. So really thinking about when you're making a pitch, be it in person, be it written, be it voice, how can you use their language? How can you recognize and see them, their values? And then how can you position yourself in a way that they definitely want to say yes? Somehow showing this is the value that I will give that will actually specifically help you. Don't just assume that when people hear your background, they'll automatically know, understand, or acknowledge the value that you're going to bring. You can say that you're an expert that has 5 years of experience in your field, but that doesn't mean someone's necessarily going to make the jump to, oh, they would add value, but build that bridge for them. I have 5 years of experience in digital marketing. Therefore, I can go over the biggest 10 mistakes that lose companies thousands of dollars so that you don't. Now, another point here is that authenticity is your superpower. This is why I'm so against all the beigeness, even for corporate these days, because if you really want to stand out, being authentically you, using some of the quirkiness that you have, showing that you're a different human being can really help. So have a bit of authenticity in there. Now, something else I like to say about pitching, I think this is the thing that really is the secret sauce, but it's not so secret, is you have to almost mentally crown yourself before pitching. What I mean by that is bring the confidence, that energy into the pitch as you're writing it. Because when you're pitching, the one who gets the yes is not the loudest. It's not the person that sends 20 emails or calls all the time. It's the person that is the most assured and clear. So go in with that energy. Go in knowing because you've done the work. And again, this is where I would say before you write any pitch, truly understand your own positioning. Watch that training I said. Use that energy. You will fail probably. You will get rejected. Over the course of 16 years, I have heard thousands of no's in my job and then in my business. Thousands. And you cannot let that stop you. Because the only reason why I started getting more yeses than nos is from the practice. It's from pitching all the time. It's from pitching when I didn't feel like they would say yes. It's from pitching even when it was the smallest chance. It's from going again and again, refining, learning, and going forward. And I still get no now. 16 years of experience, and I will still get no. Partly it's because what I'm going after is much higher, but it's also a big part of this is because you just can't avoid it. It's going to happen. You are not going to always nail perfectly the psychology of the other person or your positioning or the language. But if you're getting it the majority of the time, even if you're getting it 1 out of 10, but that one is an amazing client, an amazing partner, an amazing podcast, 1 out of 10, it is still worth you doing. Putting yourself out there to do it. This is a life skill. This is something that if you can master it, it makes everything actually better in your life. Not just your business and not just your career, but also it helps with relationships and it also helps with friendships and with anything else you want to do. Because when you understand, when you really learn how to give people what they need and to really see them and acknowledge them, it makes every interaction you have that much better. You won't feel any more like you have no control. You will feel like you definitely have some agency here. And that is from being able to master this skill. Now, I want to hear from you. So send me on Instagram at Sade Rael. You can also see the link in the show notes. I want to know your pitching stories. And I would love to share them if you'll let me, but I would love to hear them, your face plants and your wins, the things that went really bad when you pitched and the things that went really good. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.